Hi, everyone. Welcome to the June 22nd weekly JupyterLab call. Today we have 16 people and a light agenda. So let's see how much we actually have to discuss. Let's see. We have two issues that are open for a vote in the Team Compass, issues 149 and 150. They're both linked in today's agenda. I don't know who wrote that bullet point. I will probably chime in, but I'd rather whoever added it to first start speaking about it and introduce it, and then maybe follow up after that. So,
I'm happy. I wrote the bullet point.
Okay.
And I was going to ask Darian to discuss them. There's my introduction.
Thanks, Jason. I asked Sylvan to talk about them, but I don't see him here. So that's cool. Okay. So as we are approaching JupyterLab 4 and looking to release RTC in a production-ready way, we have we've been refactoring some of the original implementation and shoring up some of its missing features, and also thinking about what the production API looks like. There is a large pull request by Carlos that implements the new APIs and a refactor of RTC. And there has been a lot of discussion in that PR over the approach, and there is, at its core, some disagreement over where collaborative data structures that model concepts in JupyterLab ought to reside. So we have a notebook model and we have a cell model, for example. And traditionally, we put models that describe a thing that has a widget counterpart in the same package as the widget implementation. But when it comes to collaborative data structures, we've had a thing called ModelDB, and we now have a package called shared models. And so there's some divergence from that original simpler way of packaging things together. And so as a way to try to set the constraints around the APIs we eventually ship with RTC, and as a way to help figure out if we can arrive at a consensus between two different ideas of how to implement and organize these packages, Brian wrote two issues. One of them has to do with this problem I've been describing of where should collaborative models reside? Where should the cell model be? Should it be in the cells package or somewhere else? Where should the notebook model be? Should it be in the notebook package or somewhere else? So that's one issue. And the other issue is also brought about by the real-time collaboration conversation. That is about the metadata top-level attribute that exists in the notebook format, and whether it ought to be seen from the point of view of the data structure that resolves multiple writes to it in the real-time collaboration functionality, whether it should treat metadata as an opaque JSON blob, where if you are an extension author, for example, you are writing an extension that allows you to comment on individual cells, and the data store for your comments is notebook metadata. Or you are an extension that allows for tagging, and you store of individual cells, and you store those tags in notebook metadata, et cetera. You can imagine lots of notebook extensions that want a place to store their state or other information, and they use metadata. So the question is, if you're one of those authors, should you be able to effectively subscribe to your key in metadata, or should you subscribe to all metadata changes and only react to the ones that are yours? And so I tried to frame both of those questions without an answer, but the questions are written with a proposal. In the case of the packages, the proposal in the vote is that a notebook model should ship in the same package that ships a notebook panel, notebook widget. And a cell model should ship in the same package that ships the actual cell widget implementation. And in the case of the second question, the proposal is that at least one level, the top level of metadata, should be addressable individually instead of metadata being a generic blob. And so those are the two issues being called for a vote. Now, hopefully, what that means is if we arrive at a definitive answer to those questions, it gives us a better frame for reviewing Carlos's PR versus alternate models of implementing the same functionality. That's the level of detail that I'm comfortable going into this, because I am not completely immersed in this the way other people are. But yeah, that's the sort of top level context of those two issues.
And I want to add, I think this is maybe the first time that we're officially calling for a JupyterLab council vote. So this is a step in the governance process as well.
We did this once already. Fred called the vote about the UI toolkit.
Yeah,
although
that's right.
We didn't follow the letter of the law there, we actually kept that vote open longer than a week. These two issues, Brian wrote the issues inside the JupyterLab repo, and I wrote their counterpart votes in the JupyterLab team compass, and I wrote them Monday night. So if we do want to operate within the confines of the new governance, the issue remains open until anywhere on Earth next Monday. And the idea was we at least have this call in addition to the 4 issues and the pull request to talk about it and answer questions. Brian is away, so he can't really answer questions about these, but hopefully he's written enough in the issues to at least articulate his point of view. But yeah, unfortunately, he will not be around to answer questions on things that he wrote, but hopefully someone else will be able to fill in any gaps.
Yeah, Brian is out on vacation for much of this week. He's in transit. He told our team here at AWS that he might be available to like occasionally chat via Slack, but he's going to be somewhat incommunicado this week.
If this is kind of combining the discussion phase and a voting phase. If there is discussion about the issue that sort of extends beyond the week, I assume we can extend the vote.
I think that's probably sound. I'm not sure. I guess it also depends on So suppose it's next Tuesday, and we have enough votes to have established quorum and arrive at an answer, but there's also conversation. I don't think the rules are ambiguous. The rules would say the vote passes, but I'm not sure what you would think is the best outcome there. Do you think that that ought to extend the voting phase, or do you think that if the voting requirements are met, that it's sufficient?
Yes, I think it ought to extend the voting phase. I think a week is kind of a short voting phase for an involved architecture decision for people to dive in if they haven't been paying attention. And if they are able to dive in the first week and start discussing things, then I think that would, letting the discussion proceed would be a wise thing.
Okay. So,
particularly since the author of the PR is essentially out of touch. So any questions about their intent, this is kind of hypothetical because there's not a lot of discussion on it. There's a few basic comments, but I would love to jump in and probably have or ask some questions and things.
So a few more bits of context, and also Tony asks a relevant question, which is how does this issue tie into the notebook schema? Let me first address Jason's question and then see if I understood Tony's and try that too. So the actual implementation of the RTC features is quite a large PR and intimidating and probably an unreasonable thing to ask everyone in the JupyterLab Council to read and understand. These two issues are designed to be more bite-sized and easy to reason about on their own in the absence of an RTC conversation at all, because it just didn't seem likely that we would be able to get, whatever it is, 14 people to read a really long PR, because we can't get 3 people to read a really long PR. So I think that the hope is these issues don't require deep dives. I think it's more like if you were designing an API and you want to ship an API and you knew this about the history of the project, what would your preference be? Would the API look like this or look like that? And I don't know if it is still too big a climb, because it still might be a question that even with the description there, it doesn't have enough context to decide on. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but that's the intention anyway, because the PR is intimidatingly large and it can't really be broken up into little bits because it's a fundamental feature that touches a lot of parts of the application. To Tony's question, so I imagine you don't mean NB format. NB format remains completely untouched by all of this. And I imagine that when you say notebook schema, you're not talking about the formal definition notebook. Is that correct?
Well, I feel like the pool doesn't have enough waves in it today. So part of me thinks that maybe it's time to reevaluate the notebook format. Like, what does V5 look like? Because we've done a lot of weird stuff in V4, and sometimes I'm wondering if like the current document format that we have is amenable to the future that y'all are talking about. Like, I can see it complying with version 4, but what does the Jupyter universe look like in version 5, where we can use schema across the applications, when we can dereference schema, when we have, we have a lot of we're talking a lot of schema now. And I'm wondering if there's a bigger leap, like, I mean, I'm talking a year leap of discussion, but like, is there a version 5 that's more amenable to the future that y'all are dreaming of?
somebody other than me please speak?
I think that might be out of scope for this particular decision, which is a API code architecture decision that doesn't touch the actual format. However, I think a separate conversation about the future of the notebook format is very interesting.
That's all I wanted to get. Jason likes the waves. Cool.
Are there any other questions, concerns, comments about what's in the issues up for a vote?
I'm just curious about the question there. Are both technically possible?
Both what?
Technically possible. So there's two options, right? For the vote. One of them is everything is fine-grained at the metadata level. Is that something we can currently do, or is that something that needs much more work to be able to do?
I think that offering the ability for a top level key in metadata to be the thing that you observe, but not make any assumptions about what it contains is possible today. I think more structure than that would require some probably either definition of metadata beyond what we currently have in MB format or some other thing. So one level I think is achievable because we know it's a JSON blob and we know JSON blobs are made of keys, right? Keys with arbitrary values. So if you're just saying that the top level keys of this JSON blob are addressable, that's achievable immediately. Beyond that, I don't think we can apply more structure without making fundamental changes. But really, as an extension author, presumably you only care about top level things because your extension's presumably writing to metadata.foo.
Well, so there might be, things like tags or whatever that multiple things are looking into, but there are potentially other ways to do that. But I was just wondering about this thing that it says that this decision would rule us out, us making decisions now that would have make it difficult or impossible to move in this direction over time. So is that the way you just described, is that compatible with future things that make it more fine-grained?
I think treating metadata as effectively a blob that's a black box makes it harder in the future to deal with it being fine-grained, but treating it as a thing that has at least one level of hierarchy probably makes it easier to add other levels of hierarchy in the future if we wanted.
Yes, what I'm hearing is that no matter which decision is made, we should be able to get a change in before 4.0.
This question is about what goes into 4.0, so yeah.
Yeah, that answer is, I just wanted to make sure that both options were actually, something we were capable of implementing.
Right. Anyone else? Okay. I'll remind you guys again, if there's something you'd like to add to the agenda, please do. But for now, let's see some shiny stuff from Alex.
Sure. Let me pad out the agenda with a quick demo. I'll share my screen. So I don't know how many people here know what Streamlit is. It's a pseudo competitor with Voila. It uses Python as a base instead of notebooks. But it spins up its own web apps per file to run. And so I took advantage of the iframe widget to allow me to open up files. So if you can see here, I just open up a Python file and I can just start a Streamlit app based on that file, and it will spin it up in a new tab. Sometimes it takes a second, and it just inserts a Streamlit app into the tab. You can also right-click a file and run in Streamlit, and it will also open it up. You can have as many of these as you want, as long as your processor doesn't struggle too much. And you can also right-click and run in Streamlit. So it's a cool little demo. This is just taking, again, advantage of the iframe. So this is a backend server extension that is called via an API to spin up an instance for the given file. And then it just returns the URL that that instance span up. And then it's inserted into an iframe using the iframe widget. So this is specific to Streamlit currently, but this methodology can be used for pretty much any web app that could be spun up on the back end. And my coworker, Alan, is also working on leveraging the Jupyter server proxy extension to proxy these applications directly into the lab path. So just a fun little demo for people who are interested.
Is there a way to pop out the application into its own window as well?
Open frame and new tab.
Okay, so
that's always
purely a frame. Got it.
Yes, though I believe, yeah, that should still be possible even after we do the proxy. It'll just be that the URL at the top is the lab path instead of localhost.
And then what kinds of apps do people author in Streamlit? Like, are there drag and drop sort of interactions that might not work great in an iframe? Is it safe to do whatever you like?
That was actually my biggest worry, is because the iframe widget actually turns on all of the what's it called? It turns on all the security by default. The I lost the name. Container, like it blocks everything from coming in and out of the iframe, which is not default. If you just like write up an iframe in HTML, you have to add those things. In order for this to work, you have to actually disable all that security. So because any web app will need to have the ability to run JavaScript code and access the JavaScript libraries that are located in your web browser. So what's in the iframe can run JavaScript in Jupyter, can access JupyterLab. So in this case, I confirmed that Streamlit itself has no code that could do that, and that Streamlit itself actually encapsulates any user inputted code and prevents it from being run outside of its own iframes. So in this case, the only security constraint here would be if the actual Streamlit web app code itself was compromised. You don't have to worry about user inputs.
If you hit any points where the iframe widget in lab needs a more customizable instantiation option or some other API, like this is a good time to modify that API because it's a pretty major release.
That's a good point. I did run into an issue yesterday. If you notice, let's just back all these out. Also, when I close that tab, it also sets an API call to end that process. So it's not like kernels where they stay up and running once you've closed them.
Okay, cool.
We did consider that, and then we thought about it real hard, and we're like, that's not worth the effort.
You could populate your running tab with your running Streamlit applications. That's a thing the extension could do.
This, if you notice, this is all blank and white. I did consider finding a way to put some sort of loading text in there, essentially. Because that time where you saw it was blank and white is actually the URL inside the iframe is just not set. I wait for the API call to return before I set that URL. So during that time where it's blank and white, there's just no URL set. So it'd be interesting to see if we could add a feature where when no URL set, it uses some like loading text or something.
You should be able to populate the main area widget yourself if you have that information, right?
Correct.
Oh, and Jason says the main area widget has a spinner built in.
Yeah, it's just a matter of tying that into the no URL being set. And that would be something that would potentially work inside the iframe class itself rather than needing to implement on a per usage basis.
Okay.
But it's good to know that's actually built into main area widget. I had not actually looked into that yet.
There's a
I think for that particular use case, you're better off using main area widget as the container that you populate with your loading or whatever you want to. But the place where I wonder more if you want customizability is in setting iframe options. If you want to be able to instantiate an iframe widget that has an iframe with a different security profile than what you currently get out of the box.
So I actually think the iframe security stuff is actually pretty well done already. It allows you to fully customize it. It's that it's turned on by default. So I forget, let's just inspect this real quick. If I remember correctly. Where's the iframe? The iframe sandboxing, there's the word. So if you do not set sandbox, then there's no security. That's default behavior. But if you set sandbox equals empty string, that turns on sandboxing because these are whitelisting of disabling specific things. And specifically when you allow same origin and allow scripts, it's essentially the same as not having sandbox, because allowing scripts lets you run JavaScript and allowing same origin allows, well, that's a cost thing, but this is key because if you don't have allow same origin with iframes, the iframes can't access standard JavaScript libraries located in your browser, like because they can't access the sources and the storage.
So are you saying that sandbox attribute is superfluous, that it's identical to just not having one?
In this use case, yes.
I'm confused about this. Sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
But even if you have allow same origin and allow scripts, you wouldn't be able to access things such as authentication cookies, right?
You could access anything you can access within the console, is my understanding. So if I can do something in this console, then the web app inside the iframe could do something in that console.
Also,
yeah.
How could you make a call to the JavaScript context that's in the main frame? You can access the same source, but you can't run code in that context.
A better way of putting it is anything in the iframe can do anything that the app outside the iframe can do.
Okay, so how do you change the DOM outside?
You just can do like window.find div.
No, because that would be the window of the iframe.
Yeah. Do you have window.parent?
It might be that. I never played with that security. I just know this from what the documentation of iframe sandbox says. iframe sandbox specifically says when you turn these two scripts on, you might as well not be sandboxing. That's in the Mozilla documentation for iframe sandbox.
Yeah, so that's, as far as I understand it, that's in with regards to the server. As long as you have allow same origin and allow scripts, any scripts you load in there can hit the server with the same permissions as your outer frame can. But that doesn't mean it can break out of the iframe into the JavaScript context of the outer frame. So I think that's correct, but I have been wrong many times before when I'm looking at this.
No,
that is my best guess.
That is an interpretation of that text in the documentation I read that would also make sense.
Okay.
So this is, I wanted to share this because this is what I've been doing kind of in my spare moments for the past couple of weeks for one of our customers. And this, we haven't decided how we want to open source this yet. It's currently just sitting on my own repo, but it will probably go into some open source org, if not Lyra, Code, or if there's interest elsewhere. And I still need to finalize the licensing because I made this using the cookie cutter and it's currently still just cookie cutter licensed. But this is available for playing with if people want to. And it's a good example of how to embed a web app in an iframe. We have a couple other examples floating out and about there that I also looked at, but it's always nice to have a couple more.
So 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is, can you drag that CSV from the file browser into that upload CSV?
Ooh, that's a question. I don't think so, but no.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
Can you drag that CSV from your local file system onto that?
In theory, I would be able to do that. Yes. That's not a CSV file though. Let's see. Is there a way to just show this? No, there's not.
There's no show in Finder, sadly.
Yeah.
You could download it from there and like re-upload it.
Oh yeah, you could just download it from there. That's true.
Yes. How do I do that? Download. And then let's see. Yep. Apparently it doesn't like it though.
Do you trigger window resize on fast for resize events on the container of the iframe, or do you have some mechanism for that? Or is this hard coded into the iframe?
I do not know.
Looks like it's reactive. If you didn't do anything specifically for that, it probably already does it.
Yeah, I just use the iframe as is, so any behavior is
okay,
coming from that naturally. I'm intrigued to see what this 403 was, though. Apparently, there's a permissions issue there. That's good to note. Yeah, as I said, this is still in progress. Just tinkering with it. But also, it does handle opening non-Streamlit supported files. It'll just throw errors at you. Because it's not a Streamlit, like it doesn't use the Streamlit code.
Cool.
So fun little web app for everybody to see. So, but this methodology can be extended to pretty much any web app that you want to run within JupyterLab.
Well, thanks for demoing it.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me fill time.
Yeah, no. So, okay, 3 things. One is 6 items need triage, but I would propose putting that at the end, what with a dedicated triage call that happens tomorrow. 2 is, it looks like Mike would like to do a demo. And 3 is that Sylvan wasn't here before, but if there are questions that I didn't sufficiently answer, despite my best efforts, he might be able to. So just briefly, cast your mind back to pre-demo times. It was a dark space. Is there any light Sylvan can cast? And if not, we'll go to Mike's demo. Okay, cool. So Mike, it is your turn.
Yeah, this is a simple application I was playing with recently, and it basically allows you to control JupyterLab using your voice. Unfortunately, the API for that is only available for Google Chrome. And we can see whether it works. Open notebooks example. No. Open notebook example. Select cell below. Select cell below. Yeah, it does have some problems with recognition sometimes, but restarting that process should usually fix that. Enter edit mode. Yes. Type test. Delete last word. So what it does, it basically allows you to execute any command that is in the command palette. So it tries to match those, and using some edit distance measure will suggest if the voice recognition didn't match exactly the command that you set, it will just suggest several options, and you can choose from those. And mostly it allows to operate JupyterLab without using mouse or keyboard, with the exception that currently you have to activate the voice control subwoofer, and that will be either using a keyboard shortcut or using your mouse. And of course, the user interface is very simple for now. Yeah, that's it.
This is awesome, and I have a million questions, but so I'm sure other people will have comments and questions. I'll let them go before me. It's a collective action problem. They all want to speak, but they don't know which one should speak first. That's what's happening right now, right? Are you guys kidding? This is voice control in JupyterLab. Is that not insane? No,
I think it's really cool. I don't have much to say other than that's really cool.
Given the raft of Alexa security concerns, I'm afraid of saying delete all right now.
RM-RF. Enter.
Doesn't work.
Which language to Chinese?
Thanks for thinking of a much more innocuous example, Sylvan. This is really cool.
Yeah, it's not working. It's disabled right now, so the microphone is off, and I'm in my headphones. But yeah, that's a concern, I guess.
So, what is happening when you speak? What process receives the audio? Can you just describe a little bit what this implementation looks like?
Yes, so this is really going to the Google servers, probably, because the implementation of the speech recognition API is browser dependent, and Mozilla has made some effort to implement this, but it was originally proposed by Google. And in Chrome, it is said that it was said that it will go to the servers for recognition by the neural networks. But the details of that, I guess, might have changed since then. Mozilla was exploring doing the same and doing voice recognition in the cloud, but also in the future allowing for certain languages an offline recognition client to be installed. But all of that, it is really stalled. There wasn't much progress since 2014, I believe. So yeah, you need a Google Chrome to work with that, and some of the Chrome-derived browsers, such as Edge, will not work with this API. They implement the speech synthesis. So what you didn't hear was that when it was asking me whether did I mean some command, I can also have speech synthesis enabled, and it was actually speaking to my headphones. So I wasn't just saying yes into the void. It was more like a dialogue, but because of the Zoom options, I didn't know how to share that.
And how does support for other languages work?
So on the side of voice recognition, so I guess that works very well because Google does them very well. On the level of the extension, because we have language packs, it will match against the labels in the language that is currently being used by the user. There is still some work needed to be done because currently the translator API does not expose which language is currently set, so we cannot tweak the voice recognition to listen in any specific language. But I guess this is something that there is already an issue open for.
Why did you write this?
You know, I have sometimes an issue operating with just one hand, and this allows me to work with Notebook just when I have one hand available. So that really helps.
Amazing, nice work. This is
You
really
needed
cool.
a side project, another one from your PhD, right?
So that literally took 10 hours of coding. So it was done in 24 hours after my PhD. Yeah, so it's the beauty of the template of the cookie cutter that allows to set up everything so quickly. It's really amazing, and I think that's the ability to create an extension so quickly is something which is really a fruit of work of many of you. Thank you.
Very cool. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Suppose we could do the triage now. But one last call. Anyone else?
Please don't make us do triage.
That's basically what I'm getting at, yeah. But
it's nice to be
right.
needed.
I mean, look, you know, cities need sewer systems, but not everyone wants to do that job.
Well, I'm proud to be the sewage engineer for our issues queue, notwithstanding how Darian feels about our brave issue filers. So we have eight minutes and 6 open issues. So let's take a look at least a few of them. The main purpose of triage for folks who haven't been to a meeting or discussed it on this call is we are going to accept an issue by removing the needs triage tag if it's something that someone developing in JupyterLab would conceivably fix and then be accepted by the community. And if we need more info, then we'll tag it with needs info. So this issue came in 9 days ago. It's asking that, saying all files and directories are gone from the File Explorer in JupyterLab. So last week we asked, what JupyterLab version are they running? Are there any errors? And we have not gotten any info back. So I know there was another issue that Mike had helped out with, that hidden files were had disappeared, but that was by design. But I don't know of any other things that might be related to this. Any thoughts on this? All right, in the absence of any additional guidance, we'll just move on. Users getting signal 15 stopping where a long-running JupyterLab instance crashes. This person is running 7 kernels, letting it sit active, and then JupyterLab gets disconnected. And they're running on AWS EKS Kubernetes cluster. So I pointed out there was a similar discourse thread about shutdown issue. And then Ranadeep put some additional info in the issue. Researchers are running to this issue where there's a long-running notebook. There's nothing stopping the kernels before we see received signal 15 stopping. Not a resource exhaustion issue. CPU, memory, disk are fine, well within limits. No other processes interfering with JupyterLab and Jupyter Hub, both running on their own pods on EKS.
This made me realize I should probably stop recording at this point.
Yeah, everything's on the record anyway.
No, that's fine, but there's no need to record this.
That's fair.
Darian just wants people to come back next week and not watch the video. Watching the video, they want to come back next week.
All right, brace yourselves, everybody.